Teenage girl uses a Ouija board in a school bathroom. A few months later, she's dead. Cause of death? Unknown. The police showed up at the family's apartment afterward, and a detective wrote in his official report that he witnessed paranormal activity. Signed it, stamped it, filed it. That is the only time in Spanish history that I know of a police officer put that in writing, and that's entry 1. The lightest film on today's list. I'm Dr. Nika. We're going to Spain, Chile, Mexico, and Argentina. 11 films, and I promise you, it gets so much worse than a dead girl and a Ouija board. Let's go. Number 1, Verónica, 2017, Spain. Okay, so I told you, this one's the fun one. The one you can watch with friends on a Friday before things get dark. But fun doesn't mean lightweight, and I want to give you the real story underneath it before we talk about the film. 1991, a real teenager named Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro used a Ouija board at school during a solar eclipse. She started having seizures and hallucinations shortly after. Her family reported objects moving in their apartment, voices, things they couldn't explain. She died in August 1991. Nobody ever officially determined why. When investigators visited after her death, a detective named Jose Pedro Negri wrote in his official report that he personally witnessed what he could only describe as paranormal activity. Moving objects, unexpected sounds. He signed his name to it. The official police stamp went on it. And right now, I apologize if I pronounce these names and everything wrong. So Paco Plaza, the director who made this film, grew up hearing about Estefania. He said every Spanish person his age knows about this case. It's spread through schools, gets a little different every time someone tells it. Lives in the culture like a ghost story that won't quietly leave. Because it's not a ghost story, it actually happened to a real girl and nobody has a clean explanation. Verónica, 2017, on Netflix. Sandra, 15, living in a working-class Madrid apartment in 1991 with 3 younger siblings she's basically raising alone. Her dad just died. Her mom works nights at bar. She's a teenager holding a household together with no adult support and no sleep, and grief she hasn't had time to process. During the solar eclipse, she sneaks away from her siblings to do a seance with 2 of her friends in the school basement it was. She's trying to contact her dead dad. The planchette shatters, something goes wrong, and from that point, Veronica isn't okay. Here's the psychological thing I want you to hold. The horror in this film starts at the exact moment Veronica does something for herself. One small teenage act of stepping away from her responsibilities. And the film's argument, whether you read it literally or clinically, is that she opened something she didn't know how to close. Now, clinically, there is a real documented phenomenon called stress-induced perceptual disturbance, where extreme chronic stress, grief, and sleep deprivation produce sensory experiences that feel completely real. Veronica is running on empty and on every possible way. The film never tells you definitively what happens to her is supernatural or the product of a nervous system that's been pushed way past what it can carry. That ambiguity is intentional, and it's the most honest thing about it. When this dropped on Netflix in 2018, people were posting that they couldn't finish it, that it was too scary. I'll be straight with you. It's not scary, it's not extreme, especially on this list, but it's effective. The real case underneath it gives every scene a weight that pure fiction doesn't have. Dread scale 6 out of 10. The entry point. Enjoy it while it lasts. Number 2, Wreck, 2007, Spain. Same director, completely different animal. Here's the question before we go in. Have you ever trusted a camera? Like really trusted it? Felt safer because something was being recorded? Felt like the footage was proof that you'd survive whatever was happening? It's going to do something to that feeling. Angela is a TV journalist doing a segment for a late night show, following a fire crew through their shift. Slow night until a call comes in. An elderly woman in distress at an apartment building in Barcelona. The crew goes in, and the building gets locked from the outside, sealed by people in hazmat suits who won't communicate, won't explain, or say when it ends. No one going in or getting out. What's happening inside moves faster than anything biological should move. People who were fine 10 minutes ago aren't fine anymore. The whole film is shot through Angela's cameraman, Pablo's camera. And in the final sequence, one of the most effective final sequences in horror, power goes out. The camera turns into night vision, that green, grainy, thermal image, you know it. And what the night vision finds is that something that human eye in natural light would miss entirely. The camera doesn't protect Angela. It finds the threat faster than she can. The thing she trusted to document her survival becomes the instrument that shows her what was already in the room with her. That's an extraordinary, precise piece of psychological engineering. We extend so much trust to recording devices. We believe that what's captured is what's real. Takes that trust and uses it against you frame by frame. But here's a layer that most people don't talk about. What this film is also depicting is the specific horror of being abandoned by institutions in a crisis. The authorities who sealed that building didn't tell anyone inside what was happening or why. No information or timeline. They decided from outside in their hazmat gear that the people in the building were expectable losses, sealed off, documented, and left. That's not just a horror movie premise. That's what happens to communities deemed expendable in a crisis. Spain has its own history of that. Under Franco, entire communities were simply removed from the official record. The seal on the building is a very Spanish image, even if the plaza and directors never said so directly. So people in that culture will understand this movie better. Guillermo del Toro called it one of the most terrifying films he'd ever seen. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it earned every one of those. The American remake is called Quarantine. It's fine. Watch. Threat scale 8 out of 10. The last 10 minutes are among the best in the genre, period. Number 3. Sleep Tight, 2011, Spain. Quick question. If you have one, the concierge of your building, the person who has a master key, who knows your schedule and greets you by name every morning, how much do you actually know about them? Sleep Tight 2011, directed by Jaume Balagueró, the other half of the team, this time on his own. Cesar manages a Barcelona apartment building. He's pleasant and remembers everyone. He's the kind of employee that notices when your mail piles up and takes it inside for you. He also can't feel happiness. He's incapable of it his whole life. And the only way he's found to feel anything at all is by making other people miserable. He's fixated on Clara, a resident who's genuinely, relentlessly cheerful. Her happiness feels like a personal attack to him. So he's been systematically, methodically working to destroy it. He has a key to her apartment. The film opens with Cesar already deep inside Clara's life in ways she has no idea about it. And rewatch and maintain both versions of himself simultaneously. The helpful, warm concierge in the hallway, and the person who actually is in her apartment when she's asleep. That's creepy. I want to ask you something honest. Have you ever felt genuinely irritated by someone who seemed effortlessly happy? Like their good mood was somehow aimed at you? Almost everyone has. It's a very human, very fleeting feeling. Cesar is what happens when that feeling isn't fleeting, when it becomes the whole architecture of a person's existence. Clinically, what Cesar presents maps onto something real, severe impairment of what we call hedonic capacity, meaning the brain's reward system genuinely doesn't respond to things that should feel good. There is documented research suggesting this can develop from severe early neglect that disrupts the circuits before they're fully formed. Balaguero doesn't give Cesar a backstory. He doesn't need to. The behavior is the whole portrait. What makes this film so specifically unsettling isn't violence, it's proximity. The horror is already in the building. It already has a key and knows your routine and looks from the outside like someone who's just trying to help. Dread scale, 8 out of 10. Check your locks after this one. You won't be able to help it. Number 4, The Skin I Live In, 2011, Spain. Pedro Almodovar isn't a horror director. He's one of the most celebrated filmmakers alive, known for vivid color, melodrama, for complicated woman and desire with grief made into art. When he announced what he's making a horror story without screams or frights, nobody quite knew what to do with that. What they got was one of the most psychologically disturbing films in Spanish cinema. The Skin I Live In. Antonio Banderas plays Robert Lidgard, a brilliant plastic surgeon living in a beautiful estate in Toledo. In his basement, there's a woman named Vera. She's been there for years. Robert has developed a new synthetic skin stronger than human skin, resistant to damage, and he's been testing it on her body. She does yoga in her room, makes art. She's kept in a gorgeous cell where Robert experienced in her body in a private laboratory. The film is told out of sequence. About halfway through, there is a reveal that completely changes what you've been watching. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but here's what I will tell you. After that reveal, this stops being a mad scientist with a captive story and becomes something about identity and about the body as a site of absolute power and what it means to be physically remade into something you never chose to be. Almodovar, he said he didn't want jump scares or a score designed to manipulate you. He wanted the dread to build from understanding, from slowly grasping what's actually happening in that house and what Robert has actually done to another human being over years. Slow building dread from comprehension is a much harder thing to pull off than traditional horror mechanics. Most directors can't do it. Almodovar does, and I loved it. The clinical reality underneath this film is something forensic psychology documents in extreme cases of captive abuse. The attempt to obliterate a person's identity by controlling their body. You see versions of this in cult literature, in documented prisoner of war cases, in patterns of intimate partner violence, where one person tries to erase who the other person is through control, behavior, and access to self. Robert takes that to its most literal possible expression. The film is shot like a painting. Everything is gorgeous. The house, lights, framing, and the director does that on purpose. He wants the beauty to make the horror harder to hold, not easier. He calls it a horror story without screams or frights. And he was right. The frights are there, they're just very quiet, and they build until They're enormous. Dread scale, 8.5 out of 10. Number 5, The Devil's Backbone, 2001, Spain, Mexico. What is a ghost? Guillermo del Toro has an answer, which I love. One of my favorite directors. He is a genius. We'll talk about directors in future videos. What is a ghost? It's one of the most psychologically precise things anyone in horror cinema has ever said. He said, a ghost is a tragedy that hasn't been resolved yet. The Devil's Backbone, co-produced by Spain and Mexico, set in 1939, the last months of the Spanish Civil War. A 12-year-old boy named Carlos is brought to a remote desert orphanage after his father is killed fighting for the Republican side. And in the courtyard, there's a bomb dropped by Franco's forces, never detonated, just standing there in the dust, like something nobody knows what to do with it. In the basement, there's a tank of murky water with something floating in it. And at night, in the dormitory, there's something that used to be a boy named Santi. Santi was murdered. He knows it, but he can't leave the place where it happened. Del Toro has talked about this film more than any other in his career that I know of. He said the ghost is a repository of pain. He said that every image in the film is about things that can't be spoken about. Grief that's been forbidden, history that's been buried, and the dead who haven't been allowed to rest because nobody has acknowledged what was done to them. And here's what I need to give you the real historical context, because it makes the film land differently. When Franco's forces won the Spanish Civil War, tens of thousands of Republican dead were buried in unmarked mass graves across the country. Under the Franco regime, which lasted until 1975, you couldn't publicly mourn someone who died on the wrong side. You couldn't name what happened to them. And that is very familiar if you're from Iran right now. I don't want to talk about politics or anything like that. But the grief was criminalized. The dead were officially erased. Del Toro made this film in 2001, Spain's historical memory law, the first formal legal attempt to acknowledge those victims and fund the excavation of mass graves, wasn't passed until 2007. He made this film 6 years before his own country officially admitted those graves existed. The bomb in the courtyard that never goes off, and the ghost in the water that won't leave. Del Toro put every element of Spain's suppressed historical trauma into a children's ghost story set in a desert orphanage. That's not whimsy. That's the only language that sometimes gets past the defenses people put up around the things they can't bear to look at directly. Call it a fairy tale first, then say the true thing inside it. Dread scale, 7.5 out of 10. It'll break your heart more than it'll scare you. The fright is in the heartbreak. Number 6, Tigers Are Not Afraid, 2017, Mexico. This is the one that's going to hurt, and I want to warn you about that before we go in. It's not because of gore or those things. It's about who's it's about. Tigers Are Not Afraid, written and directed by Isa Lopez. Guillermo del Toro called it an absolutely magical film. Stephen King praised it publicly. It screened at horror festivals across the world and won multiple awards. It's about orphan children surviving a Mexican city controlled by cartels. Kids whose parents were disappeared, kidnapped, or murdered, and kids navigating a ghost town alone. Here's the real thing you need to know before the story. Mexico's drug war, ongoing since the 2000s, has produced a documented crisis of child displacement. Entire city blocks have emptied as families fled cartel violence. Thousands of children were left without parents. And it's not from a distant, sadistic kind of way, but in a they went out one day and didn't come back kind of way. Isa Lopez said she kept looking at news coverage and realizing nobody was making films about those kids. The media covered the cartels, the military operations, and the turf war drama, but nobody was covering the children left in the ruins. Estrella is 10. A school shooting starts just outside her classroom. It's not a mass shooting like in American sense. I don't know if I could say that. Just the cartels were doing what cartels do on an ordinary Tuesday. And her teacher gives her 3 pieces of chalk, tells her each one can grant a wish. She goes home. Her mother isn't there. And she doesn't come back. You know the story. Estrella finds another group of orphans living in the streets, led by a kid named Shine, who wears a tiger mask and carries a stolen cartel phone. On that phone, she and Shine find a video of what happened to her mother. Children are watching their parents' murders on a stolen phone in an abandoned building. That's not a horror movie premise. That's Mexico, 2017. The film uses magical realism the way Del Toro does. As the visual language of trauma, a trail of blood follows Estrella like a ribbon through the streets. Her dead mother appears, and the ghosts of everyone the city has lost don't leave. They stay. They follow the living through the rubble. Here's what Isa Lopez said about how the film got personal. Her own mother died unexpectedly during pre-production. Sudden, no warning. And partway through writing, she realized she built a film about children dragging the ghost of their dead mothers through streets too dangerous to grieve in. She hadn't meant to. The material found her. That's what unprocessed grief does. It finds the work and finds the art. It finds the thing you're making and gets into it whether you want it or not. Clinically, children in ongoing threat environments can't process grief the way grieving children in safety can, because the conditions that cause the loss are still active around them. You can't begin to mourn what happened while what happened is still happening. So the grief goes into the body, it goes into behavior. In this film, it goes into ghosts. The dead mother following Estrella is Estrella's grief taking a form that she could actually interact with. Because sitting with abstract loss in the middle of active crisis isn't something a 10-year-old's brain knows how to do. A child was shot in a neighboring street during filming. The production stopped for a day. Then they kept going because Lopez said the film had to exist. Dread scale, 8 out of 10. The most emotionally devastating entry on this list. By a lot. Number 7, one of my favorites. Terrified, 2017, Argentina. Let me ask you something. What's scarier, a monster you understand or a monster you can't explain? Think about it, because your brain's answer to that question is exactly what Demian Rubino built this entire film on. Terrified. Spanish title, Tiradas, I don't know how to say it, 2017, Argentina, Buenos Aires suburbs. A quiet residential street, 3 houses, 3 completely unconnected supernatural events happening at the same time, and nobody has any idea why. In the first house, Clara hears voices coming inside her kitchen drain, and not outside the drain, inside it. Her husband dismisses it. She doesn't. She's right. In the house next door, a man wakes to find something massive living under his bed. It doesn't hide when the lights go on. It sits there. And in the third house, a young boy is hit and killed by a bus. And that same evening, he's sitting at the dinner table. If you've seen this, isn't this whole thing just creepy? I love this scene. He's sitting at the dinner table, and he's not a ghost or translucent. He's just sitting there. A team of paranormal investigators and an ex-cop come in to document what's happening. And Rubna This is what makes him brilliant. Gives them no explanation or mythology. He gives you the phenomena and withholds the cause. And your brain does what all human brains do when unexplained threat happens. It goes to the worst possible way every single time. There's real psychological research behind this. Unexplained threat consistently produces more anxiety than explained threat, even when the explained version is objectively worse. We can calibrate our fear when we know what we're dealing with. We can plan, avoid, and prepare. Take the explanation away, and there's nothing for the nervous system to grip. Rupna knew this and built his entire film on it. He shows you the evidence and withholds the cause, and your nervous system generates the net risk. The image of the dead boy at the dinner table, the way he is framed, perfectly still, slightly wrong in a way it takes a second to register, is one of the most effective single horror images in the last decade. Guillermo del Toro loved this film enough to acquire the rights for an English remake at Fox Searchlight. He said he'd been looking for something that scared him the way the best horror used to scare him, and this was it. Dread scale, 8 out of 10. A masterclass in what you don't explain. Number 8. When Evil Lurks, 2023, Argentina. Same director. 6 years later. A completely different level. And I want to tell you something Demian Rugna said about why he made this film. He said he kept seeing images in Argentina news where farming families living in poverty, surrounded by industrial agriculture land, being treated with heavy doses of the pesticide. Kids in those communities being born with cancer, livestock dying, and whole families getting sick in slow, strange ways that the authorities documented and didn't do anything about it. He said you see them on the news and feel bad for a few minutes and then change the channel, but they're still there and sick. That image, the human body being used to incubate something that eventually spread and destroy everything around it, while the people with power to do something look away, is the entire film. When evil lurks, rural Patagonia, two brothers, Pedro and Jimmy, wake to gunshots in the night. At dawn, they go to look. They find the lower half of the body of someone came out to deal with something and didn't make it. And in a nearby farmhouse, there's a man called Uriel. He's been bedridden for a long time. He's swollen in ways human bodies don't swell, covered in lesions and barely conscious, but still murmuring, begging with the last of his capacity to be killed. He's what people in this world call a rotten, a human body being used to incubate a demon. The demon is close to ready. Rugna strips the possession genre completely clean. No exorcism ritual that has a chance of working. In his world, God has been absent long enough that the infrastructure built to deal with this, the cleaners or specialists, and the system has collapsed. The brothers are on their own, operating with partial knowledge, making decisions that are each individually understandable and collectively catastrophic. The film kills children on screen, not implied or cut away from. The Argentine Film Board told Brugna that there could be no blood on child characters, so the children died bloodlessly. He said fine, and in some ways, it's worse. He also kills a dog. He was warned not to, but he did it anyway. The rules in this film are specific. There are things you can and can't do when dealing with a rotten, and breaking those rules makes the demon stronger and spreads the contamination. Pedro keeps breaking them because the rules are cruel and the family is in danger, and the rules don't make room for the love he has for the people he's trying to save. And every time he chooses love over the rules, it costs someone else's life. That's the most brutal thing this film does. It doesn't punish stupidity or recklessness. It punishes love in a world that a system that's supposed to protect you has been abandoned from everyone that they have the power to maintain it. The love from the people around you is the thing that destroys you. Rugna's closing image is one of the bleakest in recent horror. He said he wanted the audience to feel what those rule of families feel: exhausted, defeated, and completely alone. Dread scale 9 out of 10. Lily, have you graced us with your presence again? No, she's like, F off, beach. Okay. Little Tiva. Number 9, The Wolf House, 2018, Chile. Before I tell you what this film looks like, I need to tell you what it's about. Because if you go in without this context, you'll watch it as a strange animated film and miss that you're watching a document of something real and devastating. Colonia Dignidon, 1961. A German man named Paul Schaefer fled Europe after being charged with child and established a compound in the remote Chilean Andes. He brought hundreds of German followers and called it a colony. He ran it as a cult with absolute total control. He continued sending children inside the compound for decades. He sheltered other Nazi fugitives. Joseph Mengele passed through, and under Pinochet's regime, Colonia Dignidad served as a detention and torture site for political prisoners. People were brought there, tortured, and disappeared. Schaefer was finally arrested in 2005, convicted of child in 2006, and died in prison in 2010. Now, The Wolf House, La Casa Lobo, directed by Cristobal Leon and Joaquim Placinia. Stop motion animation, 75 minutes. Budget of $245,000. Shot over 4 years, and what is technically it's a single take. The camera never cuts. It just moves through a house and maintains and transforms around a girl named Maria. The film opens as a piece of in-universe propaganda. A calm, professional voice describes the colony, a beautiful, peaceful German community in southern Chile. They make honey and help each other. Hard work and harmony. It was their motto. Helping makes happiness. It's warm and inviting. It sounds like a place you want to be. It's completely sinister. Maria has fled the colony after accidentally letting some pigs loose. The wolf, the colony's enforcer, is hunting her. She finds an abandoned house and shelters inside. There are 2 pigs there. She starts calling them Pedro and Ana. She gives them honey and talks to them. Over time, slowly, they begin to transform. The stop motion figure of the pig becomes something more human. The house transforms around them. Walls become floors and furniture becomes something organic. The whole structure is alive and shifting. And Maria stays. She can't leave because the wolf is outside. And she can't leave because she's been inside so long, she's forgotten what outside looks like. And leaving means admitting the colony wasn't safety. Here's what Leon and Cousinia understood about how cults actually work and what the research on high-controlled groups consistently shows. They don't look like prisons from the inside. They use the language of warmth and safety on purpose. They make living feel more dangerous than staying. The colony's motto, helping makes happiness, is kind of like the language of any wellness brand or spiritual community that operates today, right? That's not an accident, it's the mechanism. The film won the Silver Bear. The critics have called it an original horror film ever made. Nothing looks like it or feels like it. It'll take you a while to shake you the visual grammar after it ends. Dread scale, 9 out of 10. The most unique film on this list. One of a kind. Number 10, Trauma, 2017, Chile, one of my favorites. But I want to be straight with you what we're walking into here. Because if you've seen this, this is the place I find a softer angle, but I'm not going to do that today. You made it this far in the list. You can handle the truth about this one. Trauma, written and directed by Lucio A. Rojas. Multiple critics have compared it to level to extreme content to a Serbian film. One reviewer wrote that within the first minute, there's a scene so extreme, I never imagined something that sick could even exist. The film opens in 1978, a military detention compound in Pinochet's Chile. A bound woman, her estranged husband, a military officer, brings in their teenage son, Juan, drugs him, cuts his face, and forces him at gunpoint to rape his own mother. She's shot in the head. The boy is left what his father has made him to do. I need to stop here and give you the context separates this from pure exploitation because Rojas didn't invent this. Chile's National Commission for Political Imprisonment and Torture, the country's own official truth commission, which published its report in 2004, documented cases of sexual torture used systematically as a tool of political destruction by Pinochet's regime. Forced sexual acts designed to break in not in just the individual, but their sense of their own body and their sense of self, capacity to exist in relationship with other people afterward. This is in the official record. Survivors testified. The commission confirmed it. What Rojas is trying to say in his intro comes directly from that testimony. He made a film about it because he believes that what happened in those compounds is still happening through the bodies and the families of the people that broke and through the generations that came after them. The rest of the film jumps to 2011. Juan, now massive, scarred, deeply broken, lives in rural Chile with his son Mario. Four women from Santiago take a trip to a countryside near his property. What Juan does in this film is the direct output of what was done to him in that compound in 1978. That's Rojas's argument. Pinochet's regime didn't end in 1990. It ended up in the countryside and in the bodies of the people that made it. The children of those people. It's still there and still producing violence. The machine broke down, but the damage it created kept running. Trauma brings trauma, as I always say. In psychology, we call this transgenerational transmission of trauma, the documented process by which extreme violence doesn't just affect the person it happens to, but reshapes how the parent and relate and what they pass on, consciously or not, to the next generation. Juan didn't choose to become what he is. He's made. That doesn't make him not dangerous. It just makes the whole thing more disturbing because the perpetrator is also a victim of the same system that produced the violence you're watching. The lead actress said she cried for 2 days after filming the assault sequences. The cast pushed Rojas to go all the way rather than pull back. They said if the violence wasn't fully depicted, the political argument gets diluted. And he agreed. Is this film exploitation in places? I don't know. I'm not going to say it. Parts of it, maybe. Is it also the most explicit horror depiction of Pinochet's lasting psychological damage on Chilean society ever put on screen? Yes. Both things are true at the same time. I'd rather you know what you're walking into than be blindsided by it. I enjoyed this film because of its message. It could be a hard watch for a lot of people, but just know that these most disturbing movies have a message. It's deeper than for shock value. And sometimes it does get boring, yes. Dread scale, 9.5 out of 10, the hardest entry on this list to sit through. And it's also the one with the most specific, most documented historical argument to make. Number 11, The Coffee Table, 2002, Spain. I saved this one for last, and it's not because it's the most extreme. It's not. No gore to speak of, or political horror, or trauma and supernatural that we talked about. Stephen King posted about this film in May 2024. He wrote, "There's a Spanish movie called The Coffee Table on Amazon Prime. My guess is you've never, not once in your whole life, seen a movie as black as this one. It's horrible and also horribly funny. Think the Coen brothers' darkest dream. Stephen King, the man who wrote it and The Shining, who's consumed more horror than almost any living person. Whatever. He called this the darkest film he's ever seen. Well, Stephen King, that is not the darkest and most disturbing film I've ever seen. It was a good one, but no. If you're the one that has seen everything, okay, sorry. No, I'm not. I'm gonna. Anyway, written and directed by Kay Casas. Shot in 10 days in a friend's apartment. Budget? Almost nothing. Jesus and Maria are new parents and relationship under strain. Maria makes every decision. Jesus feels like he has no say in his own life. And their newborn son, Cayetano, is the small, screaming center of a marriage quietly falling apart. They go to a furniture shop. Jesus sees a coffee table. Maria hates it. She thinks it's ugly, cheap looking, and wrong for the apartment. Jesus buys it anyway. The first autonomous decision he's made in years. He assembles at home while Maria is out with a friend, or she went to a grocery shop, and something happens. I'm not going to say what. It's awful. And describing it would take something from you that the film should get to take itself. What I'll tell you is this. As Zeus spends the rest of the film, guests arriving, Maria asking questions, and the apartment needing to be moved and managed, trying to maintain normalcy about something he can't bring himself to say out loud. The film is a black comedy. There are generally funny moments, and the cast just refuses to leave the humor when the horror is happening, or leave the horror when the humor is happening. They sit on top of each other the entire film. The laughter makes you feel terrible for laughing. The horror makes you grateful when something briefly lightens it. And it lightens and you feel terrible again. Here's what this film is doing psychologically. Carefully, because I don't want to give too much away. What Jesus is trying to do in this film is something called avoidance-based coping in acute crisis. The documented pattern where someone experiencing something catastrophic maintains the performance of normalcy, then doing what that needs to be done. And it's not out of cruelty, it's out of complete psychological paralysis. The gap between knowing what you should do and physically unable to do, and your body can't do it. Most people who've been through serious trauma recognize that gap. It's the moment where you know and you can't. This film is made entirely out of that moment, stretched across 90 minutes, with company coming over. Cassis said he wanted to make a film about the random cruelty of real life, not supernatural or constructed, just the kind of thing that could happen in a normal apartment on a normal afternoon that you could never come back from. It could happen. Near at the end of the film, Jesus' brother sits down and says, "We got about 10 minutes before Maria gets back." At that point in the film, there are exactly 10 minutes left. Cassis timed it deliberately to the minute. Dread scale, 10 out of 10. And it's not because what it shows, for what it does to your chest and how long it stays there after the credits roll. 11 films, Spain, Chile, Mexico, Argentina. Every single one of them came from the same place, a country that went through something that couldn't be spoken about and made horror out of what couldn't be said. Spain buried its civil war dead in unmarked graves and told families to move on. Chile threw people out of helicopters and into the ocean and called it national security. Argentina disappeared 30,000 people, and the families still don't all know where the bodies are. Mexico has tens of thousands of children. Nobody in power is officially counting. These countries process these horror the only way they could, in the dark. And a girl who can't leave a house made a stop motion walls that breathe and found footage from a sealed building. And a man who can't feel happiness, so he takes yours. And a 10-year-old girl dragging her dead mother's ghost through cartel streets because the ghost won't leave. And honestly, she doesn't want it to. That's what this tradition is, testimony in a language of monsters. The truest thing said, and the only way it could be said. So tell me, right now, at the end of this, which one is sitting in your chest? Not the most extreme, the one that actually got in. Drop it below. I read every single one. I wanted to say I now have 3 tiers. Only if you want to join. No pressure at all. If you're curious, the doors are open. Any question you have, ask and I'll answer. Just no therapy talk, okay? I'll make it exclusive videos for the members. But on these regular ones, I'll still answer one question every time. Today's question is, what's your favorite comfort movies? Mine is Scream. I'll defend it to the end. It's pure nostalgia for me. I grew up with those movies. In high school, when we had sleepovers, most of my friends would put on cheesy romantic flicks. But they all knew when they came over to my place, it was always horror movies. If any of my childhood friends are watching this, do you remember? Scream was a fun one. Drop yours below. What's your favorite comfort horror movie? Thank you for being here. And if horror feels like home, join the Dominion.